Thank you. So, Posterscope, a lot of you might not necessarily know, but we're an agency that works in partnership with other main media agencies and specialise in the area of out of home. And I think what's interesting is out of home is probably the only medium today that we've got sort of a specific focus on, and you might wonder why that actually is. And I think that the reason is that a lot of the positive change that's going on in out of home at the moment is probably more extreme and more positive than you're getting in most other media. You know, with the exception of online, where there's obviously lots of great stuff going on. But out of home isn't really suffering from a lot of the same challenges that other media are having. It's actually more about how you can take advantage of the opportunity. And I think that. A lot of the drivers of this change, being sort of quite simplistic about it, are things like the fact that people are spending more and more time out of home. They're increasingly connected when they're out of home, so things like Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G in many other markets around the world is meaning people can access the web in more and more places with much greater speed and ease. And of course, people have the devices to be able to do that. So smartphones, tablets, laptops, and the like. In fact, I think smartphone penetration at the moment in the UK, is around about the sort of 50% mark. So very much kind of reached that tipping point. And then from a media point of view, thinking about out-of-home advertising opportunities, those are increasingly becoming networked. So what you've got is about 3 million out-of-home screens around the world that are driven by the internet. And about 210,000 of those are in the UK. But perhaps more interestingly, underneath all of this, is you've got a situation where consumers are generally responding really positively to all of this change. If you think about like mobile payments as an example of that. Not very long ago, the idea of buying something on your phone was something that seemed like it had inherent risk with it, associated with it. It's not something that you could imagine your mum doing. Whereas now, most of us wouldn't really think twice about buying something on a mobile website or buying something via an app. And that's in a really, really short space of time. So that sort of consumer receptivity and adoption to a lot of the changes that are in all of this area is something that I think is kind of really important. So all of that really, in my opinion, gives us sort of 6 themes that are really defining how advertisers, agencies and media owners are approaching out of home and will continue to approach out of home in the future. So I'll just very, very quickly whiz through each of these to explain what I mean, especially MOOH, which probably doesn't make much sense just yet. But so the first of those is about mobile and out of home. And I think that what we'll start to see is a lot more very, very tightly integrated planning of mobile together with out of home. And I'm not necessarily referring to interactive opportunities here. Most people at this point think you're talking about kind of, the latest kind of gadgets that you can use to interact with a poster. Whereas actually what I mean is that the data and the understanding about how people use their phones and where they use them and when they use them to search and to use mobile websites and apps and vouchering and all of that sort of stuff. All of the data and understanding that's in that can in theory be used to determine exactly when, where and how you use out-of-home advertising and how you go about the planning of that. And of course that then in turn goes on to influence the behaviour that people exhibit on those mobile devices in the first place. So you've got a real sort of virtuous circle. So as an example, if you can understand more about exactly where and when people search on mobile devices, you then plan out of home to drive even more mobile search. Now that's not to say that that interactivity and the latest technologies aren't important in all of this. There's lots and lots of ways of using out of home to connect people, via a poster or a screen through to some mobile content, so QR codes, more mobile augmented reality and the like. But I think we're on the cusp of a bit of a step change in this whole area, with something that a lot of you will be familiar with, the near field communications, which I'll show you. I'll show you in action here. So what you've got here is anybody who's got an NFC-enabled phone can touch their phone against an NFC-enabled poster, which just means it's got a tiny chip inside it, and that poster will then instruct that person's phone to perform an action, like open a website or open an app or something like that. Now, this technology is being backed by most of the major players in mobile, including Google. And it's also the same technology that will turn your phone into your mobile wallet, and turn your phone into your Oyster card and things like that. So you can start to see how the concept of buying something from a poster site could actually quite quickly become something that's that's quite mainstream, and we're not very far off having a situation where there's lots and lots of these NFC-enabled phones out there in use. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I talked a bit about screens and the digitisation of out of home. So at the moment, about 13% of out-of-home ad spend is on digital screens, but the vast majority of campaigns that run on those screens don't really take advantage of the connected nature of the medium, and I think that will change as time goes on. I think we'll see much more situations where creative and content on these screens is pulling in real-time data and real-time information and actually embedding that within the content itself. So really, I guess the way of thinking about it is these out-of-home screens on the underground and train stations and digital billboards and the like are essentially like websites. And I think that what we'll see more of going forward is brands using them more like websites rather than using them like, more like posters. And so I guess a sort of an extension of that thought is around the situation where you can serve ads in real time to these networks of out-of-home screens. If you can combine that with some real-time effectiveness data, what you've essentially got is quite a similar model to the demand-side platforms that Marco was talking about earlier on. But instead of having banners and impressions and clicks and dealing with all of that in real time, what you might have is screens plus eye-tracking cameras plus real-time electronic sales data. So you put all of those together, and that, in principle, allows you to optimize your creative and optimize your media scheduling all in real time, and then in turn go and trade all of that in real time as well. So that's that would be an enormous change for out of home, and just really shows, I guess, the sort of parallels between what's going on in that market and what's going on in online. I'm not saying they're the same, but you can start to see how there's certainly a lot of sort of convergence in that whole area. So really, for our business and for anybody who's involved in using out of home, data, as you're starting to see, is becoming much more important in much the same way as you've heard from the other speakers, in particular real-time data. And to give an example of that, this is from TomTom, SatNav company. So you can think about the amount of data that they've got about how people move around the country in real time, and you think about how you could use that to influence how you actually plan poster campaigns or digital screen campaigns, and how if you fuse that with other sources of data, how much more scientific we can be about how we use the medium. So data is very much integral to our future, just as much as it is the future of digital businesses. And very briefly, my last theme for the future is about the use of public utility based advertising, which isn't necessarily something that's particularly new, but I think we've got a situation where brands are really only just starting to take advantage of what technology can provide in this whole area. So one example here for Credit Suisse, whereby we branded free Wi-Fi in London City Airport to build kind of positive perceptions amongst consumers and to drive online traffic. For Yale.com, we installed interactive directories for local businesses on the streets. And interesting with these, all of the consumer reviews of those local businesses were updated constantly on these sorts of units. So when you start thinking about that sort of area, and you start thinking about data and content that would be useful to people when they're out and about, there's a whole range of possibilities that aren't being leveraged, especially being as a lot of this data that people would find useful is increasingly open source. So Boris bike availability, for example, you can get hold of data now about the exact location of every bus in London, so you can see how long till it reaches you. That data's open. Would people find that useful when they're out and about? Absolutely. So a real opportunity for brands there, and a real opportunity, I think, to use technology to make people's lives better or easier, or indeed more fun. So with all of those 6 themes that I've just very briefly talked about, I think pretty much all of those have the opportunity for new business models to be associated with them, whether that's for agencies, whether that's for the likes of us, or for the clients and media owners. So hopefully that provides a bit of stimulus for some of the debate on that subject. And I shall leave it there.